You know, the worst thing about TrackMania has gotta be the driving. So boring. Really, these cars are meant to be doing stunts. So let's take a look at this map called Flip God by Velp and Cytox. Now, this map has been around a long time, and it's almost like a rite of passage for a lot of TrackMania players. You've got to take a few jumps into a bug slide, into another few jumps, doing some twists, and then into more jumps. And it's a pretty difficult combo to pull off. But after playing this map for a while, I finally got a finish. And once I got that finish, I was very proud of it. I posted this replay as a short at one point, and I saw a whole bunch of comments saying, that's not how you're supposed to do it. I even got a message from the mapper himself saying, man, what did you do to my map? This is not how you're supposed to play this. You should take that replay down. And so I kept thinking, what is everybody talking about? I thought this was the way you're supposed to do it. I even opened the GPS thinking like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the way that the GPS told me to do it. Until I saw the correct way and realized that I had made a mistake. So instead of flying headfirst into a wall and bouncing 200 feet off of it, you've actually got to do a 1 or 2 wheel bug slide, which will flip you over and give you a really smooth landing on this ramp. Now, I have still yet to pull off a clean run on this one doing it that way, but I have done the wall bang version at least 2 or 3 times now. Now that leads us to the next map called Velp WTF14 GS Jump, and this one has a very similar mechanic, but it's a little bit easier to pull off. Again, with a couple jumps into a bug slide, into a couple of bumpers that'll really set your car up to land in the right position so that you can do your 1 or 2 wheel bug slide and flip over this wall into the finish line. And amazingly enough, while recording for this video, I almost got the world record for this map. But I mean, there's really no wall to bang off of on this one, so it was a little bit harder to use that strategy. Same with the next map, which is GS Jump 2, which feels very similar to Flip God, just a little more wide open with a lot more space to work with. And so this one I did end up getting a very clean run. I guess it's just a lot harder on Flip God, because on that one you have just tiny platforms you've got to be able to jump between. But anyway, in all of these maps you're kind of experimenting with the different ways of doing a bug slide. So if you land flat at a 90-degree angle and do a bug slide that way, you'll have a lot more grip on the ground and a lot more control, but you'll lose a lot of speed. It seems like the fewer wheels you have on the ground when doing a bug slide, the more intense it'll spin you around, and of course with a lot less control. So in this one you've got to set up a 1-wheel bug slide and do a full twist around. I guess you'd say this is a 270 turn, and then send yourself flying all the way in the other direction. I'd say the most frustrating thing about trying to hunt a map like this, the setup needs to be so specific to be able to work, because so many times when you try and line up with a 1-wheeled bug slide, you're just gonna spin out of control, you're gonna fly the wrong direction. It's really hard to get something like that to go the way that you want it to, but it's really fun to watch when you can launch in the right direction. But alright, enough with the bug slides, check this one out. This map is just a long stretch of straight platforms. There's a couple little ramps, but if you try just driving normally, driving straight through, you're not gonna be able to make a lot of the jumps. And so what could be the answer here? Well, I'm sure most of you are familiar with air braking, how when you take off of a jump and you start to flip, if you tap on the brake while flying, it'll just kind of lock you in that position. And after doing some experimenting with that, you realize that you kind of bounce off of the ground when hitting the road with the metal parts of your car. So like if you land somewhere on your tires, it's just going to absorb the impact and you're just going to keep driving. But if you hit the road with your wing or your nose or just any metal part of the car, you'll get a little bit of bounce. And so when you do it just right, you just need a few bounces on this platform to clear that gap, but you need to be able to flip over and land properly so that you can take the next boost and do it all again. And then on this last ledge, you need to be able to bounce while upside down off of this bump so that it'll launch you into the finish line. Now, I'm pretty sure this map can be done without even using turning. It's all just gas and brakes. However, it takes so much precision and it's still so difficult to pull off. And I even had one of the strangest fails I've ever had on any map while playing this one. I launched straight for the finish line, but I bounced off the top and then fell straight to the bottom and never ended up going through. But then I found out this is actually a sequel to another map. Now this one's very similar. You have to do a lot of the nose bounces, but this one's a lot more about trying to clear a whole bunch of sideways bumpers without getting bumped off the side. So I'd say it takes a lot of experience with this game to really understand the very specifics about this mechanic. So when it comes to touching bumpers, obviously if your wheels touch it, it'll bounce you. Even if the head of the driver touches it, it'll bounce you. But there are some very specific angles which if your car touches the bumpers, it technically won't trigger the bumper. And so the goal of this one is to line your car up so that you are just sort of skirting across the top of the bumpers, just lightly bouncing off of them without actually triggering the bumper. And then at one point you still have to rearrange your car to be able to bounce over this gap and then continue bouncing over the bumpers. So you've got to hold the air brake for a long time just to keep bouncing over the bumpers the whole way, and then you've got to to release the air brake at some point so that you will flip out of that position, maybe bounce off of your wing to flip over the gap and hopefully do a full front flip so that you can get right back into that position again and make it all the way to the finish. And it is really frustrating when you make it so far to the end and then the bumper knocks you right to the left of the finish. Alright, I think I've talked about this one in a previous video. So in this one, you've got to drive off to the side, but let your nose tilt down a little bit so that it'll bounce off the grass and then be pointed upwards when you hit this ramp, which if you do it at just the right angle, it'll bump you up onto this platform. And then from there, you've got to build up enough speed so that you can line up a huge grass slide and then keep a whole bunch of speed through the grass slide so that you can fly off this ramp in a backwards angle and then hit this little ledge going backwards, flipping you up into the finish line. I guess the bumping off of ledges works a little better when going backwards if you have the speed for it. I don't know for sure if that's the case, but it wouldn't surprise me just based on a lot of the ways that backwards driving works in this game. But there's also a sequel to that map called Bump 2, and this one basically just makes you utilize the beginning bump twice. But it's actually pretty hard to pull off that bump well enough to send you flying far enough to clear the gap. Alright, let's look at another bug slide real quick. So this is a case where you do kind of want to do your bug slide flat. Just because of the way the setup works, if you're not flat, you're just going to bounce out of control. But so if you pull off the perfect grass slide, you'll end up flying backwards up this hill, and then you'll be up against boosters going the opposite direction. Now, if you have a bunch of speed going backwards against backwards boosters, it doesn't really slow you down. It's kind of a weird way to get past them. But if you pull it off cleanly, you'll fly right past them and fly into the finish line. That's if you pull it off cleanly. For whatever reason, this map is so precise and you need a lot of speed to get up the jump. Alright, now here's a wild one called nose jump. So without a GPS, ones like this seem basically impossible. You'll take some boosters off a jump and you'll land on this flat platform, and then the platform past that is a little bit higher than this one. So with regular driving, this one makes no sense. And so in kind of a similar fashion to that nose down and jump map, this one relies on you having to bounce off of the metal parts of your car to be able to bounce back up onto the next platform. Except this one does like a weird 360 version of that. So right before you go off this first jump, you need to brake and drift a tiny bit so that when you start flying, you'll start twisting around and your nose will point down. And then you also need to brake a little bit while bouncing off of your nose, which then causes you to flip back around and land on your wheels again. I'm really amazed at how consistently this can work. It seems like the most RNG based trick you could pull off, but then you need full speed past that to be able to do another 180 bug slide. And if you've done everything just right, all of that speed will take you right back into the finish line. This is a map that most beginners will hate. They're never going to even want to try, but once you figure it out, it's actually not too hard. Alright, here's a map called Bouncy Magnet. Where do I even start with this one? So anyway, you go off this ramp at an angle to do a half barrel roll so that you can stick onto the ceiling, and then ride the boosters off of that, but when you drive off of a magnetic piece, you still have a little bit of magnetic force trying to pull you back in that direction, so it gives you a little bit of pull back up when leaving the magnetic piece, and then you just have to hope you land in a clean enough way that you can get around this wall, which is also magnetic and will fling you over into the finish line. You just gotta hope that you don't have too much speed and go flying way over all the finish lines. But yeah, everything about this one just feels really weird to drive. I'd say one of the most difficult parts of it is trying to figure out what cam really works for it, because I would say that cam 1, 2, and 3 all have their drawbacks with this map. So every time I've talked about launchers, it's usually squeezing you between a solid block and a bumper on the ground. But this time, Velp decided to experiment with some wall bumpers. So okay, when this map first loads up, you're just surrounded by really tall walls and a big finish line behind you. Now if you drive straight into this wall going straight, you're not going to get much of a bounce. However, if you rotate while on the grass and slide into the wall with your backside, it'll bump you up, and once you can trigger one bumper, then you're just going to start a chain reaction, triggering you all the way up the wall. So it sends you launching all the way up to the top, and then you've got to fly all the way across the map. I think the one downside to this map is the no grip block that you end up passing on the way up the wall, because when you have no grip while flying through the air, it's almost like it turns you into a frisbee, where you are very affected by the direction you're aimed, and it almost feels like you're getting dragged down by the wind. And so if you start pointing the wrong direction, you're just not really gonna be flying that way. Alright, moving past the Velp maps for a little bit, let's look at Cross the Sticks number 3. Now, I would say this map is actually pretty cacky. Now, remember when I was talking about that nose down and jump map with the bumpers, how you're trying to figure out a spot on the car that's not going to trigger the bumper when driving across it? Well, that same principle applies to these these engine cutoff blocks. So basically there's this long stretch of engine cutoffs, and then once you get past that, there's a speed check where you have to clear a jump. And if your engine is cut off, you're not going to be able to make that jump. So the whole point of this map is to get past all of the engine cutoff blocks without getting your engine cut off. So you have to figure out which part of your car can touch the ground without it triggering. Obviously, if you're landing upright, that's going to definitely trigger it. And even if you land upside down, if it touches the head of your driver, that's going to trigger it too. So it's a little bit just down to luck. I do know that driving on your side wheels is one way to get around it, but good luck just sliding along your side the whole way. Anyways, this is what it looked like when I got my one finish, so make of that what you will. But then we have Krusty Stunt number 6, and this one really is khaki. So the thing about this map is that the goal is to do pretty much what you're usually not supposed to do when doing a wall ride. So get into this wall ride and then stay low so that you can fling out the bottom end and flip onto the road on the other side. Now that's a pretty difficult trick to pull off, but now you gotta swing back around and get a little bit of speed and then do that same trick again but with your engine cut off. And I think that speed check is really what makes this second half so difficult, as it took me quite a while to get one finish on this map. Well, apparently it didn't take this guy too long to get it though. And there goes another one of my server records. And for our final map, we'll look at Krusty Stunt number 10. Now this one's kind of crazy just because of how many things you have to pull off all in such a short period of time. So it starts off with one jump, which you need to air brake immediately to get this setup just right. And if we're looking at this in very slow motion, you gotta hit this block with your nose bug to the side, catch yourself in the ramp, straighten out when driving down and maintain speed, and then set up another barrel roll jump off to the side and flip off into the finish line. Technically, all of those things on their own aren't too difficult, but doing like 4 of these tricks back to back in such a tight period of time, it gets pretty technical. But those are just some of the more stunty LOL maps on this server. I'm sure I'm missing quite a few good ones, but that'll always happen on a server with almost 9,000 maps now. But I'll see you next time.